Are you confused by VFR navigation logs? I sure was. Yes, of course, my instructor helped me out, and yes, of course, I looked up my fair share of tutorials, but still, I wasn't getting it. And then I came to the realization that my problem was my organization. So now here I am, using the power of technology to show you how I came up with a simple organization method to help me basically get through tutorials just so I could actually learn the VFR navigation logs. So here we are in our little VFR navigation log that we can fill out here. This isn't a proper tutorial. In fact, if you want a real good tutorial, I actually highly recommend checking out Free Pilot Training's video on the navigation log explained. It is actually the video that I used for reference to really get this down. The first step I found in dealing with this hoo-ha, find all the constant numbers, right? I'm going to write that down. If you know constant numbers, you don't have to mess with them every time you fill out a flight log. And I plug in my constant numbers by actually using the familiar method of PAVE, right? I want to find the pilot constants, the aircraft constants, the environment constants, and any external constants. So the first thing I do is, what are the pilot constants? In this case, it is that point where you measure the weight and balance of a plane, right? You got your little plane right here with the wings and stuff, and the propeller and the tail. And of course, you got the center of gravity here. And you got to load up the plane so that the tail isn't too heavy or the nose isn't too heavy. You want it perfectly balanced as it flies this away through the air. Knowing me, I like to, kind of keep track of my weight because, I like to be a healthy boy. So I know that I fluctuate in weight anywhere from 200 to 210 pounds. So I, in general, whenever I do these calculations, and also it's because of what my flight instructor told me, I always assume the worst. The heaviest weight, the slowest speed, the most amount of fuel burned, all that stuff. Of course, I'm flying with flight instructors and whatnot. We estimate, again, using a pessimistic weight calculation of 450 pounds. That's something I like. So I always know that when I'm doing my weight and balance, I can plug this number in. Next is the aircraft. Each individual craft will actually have a very meticulously measured center of gravity, for example, that you can look up in the maintenance logs. So I am using the fictitious aircraft of Alpha Juliet Alpha that I like to fly around, which you can get as a t-shirt, of course. Got to do my shilling there. I'm using Alpha Juliet Alpha, and I'm actually basing it on a real aircraft that I used when I filled out one of these with the help of my instructor using an actual aircraft we fly. So, because I know that Alpha Juliet Alpha has a constant center of gravity, I can do all the moment calculations and figure out the moments, make sure that the center of gravity is within the performance charts that, it usually looks like this thing, where they'll have like a utility category and a normal category. And this is like your center of mass. And if it's too far that way, that's no good. If it's too far this way, that's no good. If it's too heavy, that's no good. So you want to put it in this magical box. You want to be in the safety box. Another constant of aircraft is actually fuel burn. One of the things my instructor tells me, specifically for the training aircraft that we use, is to always assume the most pessimistic fuel burn, which is climbing fuel burn, which in our case is measured as 9 gallons per hour. So no matter what, in this little box here, gallons per hour, I always put 9. I am instructed to always put 9. So that's what I do. Next constant factor is environment. In this case, one thing that stays the same is the airport that you usually take off from. In my case, my training airport is KVNY, the Van Nuys Airport. I know its field elevation, which is, I think it's 807. I know I don't know them off the top of my head, but I know I can look up the runway lengths, and the shortest runway can provide, at an absolute worst case scenario of like takeoff and landing distance, plenty of distance to take off and land. So it's good to know that as you're, calculating weight and balance, for example, that even if your particular aircraft was loaded to the gills, it can still take off and land at KVNY or whatever your particular airport happens to be. In addition to this, because we do a lot of trips to specific airports, in this example I'm going to be using today, I just so happen to have this nifty little map out that I did. This fill out that I'm looking at my notes is actually based on a theoretical trip to San Bernardino. Now, with San Bernardino, I can also check out any kind of important information that I need. This is also another constant. Finally, there are external factors. Truth be told, external factors are kind of wishy-washy. Usually I do this as luggage. But if there's another external factor that, you know, plays into your constants, things you always bring or things you always do, that's something you can also calculate into your constant numbers that you can use. Which now takes me to step 2, which is gather your charts. I'm going to be real with you. This is the part where I have a bit of a bone to pick with how they wrote the POH of the Piper Cherokee, or specifically my version. Normally, in other manuals, let's take this nice little plain manual. Manual. You flip it open, right? And in the table of contents, they'll give you stuff. And nowadays, there's now a universal Section 5, right? Section 5. What's in Section 5? It is performance charts. So you can flip to Section 5 and you get all of these thingies that look like this. This here is an example of a performance chart that's found in the POH. Now, one thing I do like about the POH, even though I'm going to rip in a new one here, is that, as I mentioned before, it assumes gross weight. So even if you're loading this plane to the gills, these are some of the things you can think of. In the POH, all of these different performance charts are not in a Section 5. I had to run around and flip through pages and find all of them in different places. Now, fortunately, the performance charts were kind of in one section, but they were also separated from certain other things, such as the airspeed data, right? And the airspeed data is how you figure out that calibrated airspeed, which you need to fill out here. You see calibrated airspeed? That's something you need to calculate. It was in a completely separate thing. And here's something else. You see this? I dislike. Me no likey. Miles per hour. Okay? We do our stuff in knots, and they put it in miles per hour, and that makes me a grumpy juice boy. Okay? I gotta draw a mean face, because that's how grumpy I am. I don't like this. I like knots, okay? Yes, you can convert them, and, you know, if you whip out your calculator, you can do that. However, gathering your data means putting all of the prevalent things in one place, and then if you have to manually change these numbers, you will have to do it. For example, 66 miles per hour is calculated as 57.4 knots. 74 is 64.3. And then 71.3, 78.2, and onwards. And I had to manually write this down in my own POH. Part of gathering your charts is going to be adjusting it so that it can work for you and you can quickly look up these numbers so you don't have to whip out your calculator every single time you're doing these bloody calculations. Step 3. Let us interpolate. You know, at elevation of 5,000 feet, you have winds aloft, for example, at 310 at, 4 knots, with a temperature of 15 degrees Celsius. We're going to say at 7,000 feet, we have 320, winds at 320 at 6 knots, with a temperature of 19 Celsius, okay? And you have to figure out, well, golly bum, what's 6,000? So this is pretty easy math. There's a rule of thumb about every 1,000 feet that you go up, the temperature decreases by 2 degrees Celsius. So I did an oopsie. Let's do that. 15. There we go. 19 degrees Celsius, 15 degrees Celsius. So you think, well, golly bum. Well, 1,000 feet minus 2, you could say that that's 117 degrees Celsius. 310, 320, well, golly bum, what is that? That's about a 20 degree difference. So you can say maybe, well, you're probably looking at maybe 315, right? 315 at 4, 6, you're going to 315 at 5. So you can say, okay, so well, at 6,000 feet, interpolating between these things, you could say that the winds will probably be at 135 at 5 knots and be 17 degrees Celsius. That's the quick and dirty interpolation. However, if we go here, we are flying eastbound to San Bernardino. And the rule when cruising is that on the compass, right, on this half of the compass, through 1 degree through 179, you do an odd number plus 5,000, aka 5,500. On the other side of the compass, you do even, so like 4,500. Well, I need to figure out 5,500 interpolation. The quick thing is that because 5,500 is so close to 6,000, chances are that the winds are going to be pretty darn close to, 315 at, 5 and with a 17 degrees Celsius. However, I was told by my instructor that the really stickler check writers are going to want you to be able to interpolate this precisely. So you're going to have to do some hard dividing. 5,000 to 6,000 is essentially 1 unit. So you have to divide that by 2 so you can get 5,000, 5,500, 6,000. So what is the halfway point, for example, between 310 and 315? Well, that would be, 2.5? So the 5, that would be 312.5 at 4.5 knots. With, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15. So 18 at 18 degrees, okay? You would have to do that kind of interpolation. Now, that's quick and easy math right now. Let me tell you something. You're not going to get these nice, clean 5,000, 6,000, 7,000s when you're getting your winds aloft. What you're going to get is this, okay? Here's an example of winds aloft, all right? You're going to get 3,000, then 6,000, then 9,000, then 12,000. So big jumps, all right? Now again, 5,500 is pretty close to 6,000, but guess what? 4,500 is further away, okay? It's a little more in the halfway part, which means you're going to have to start using your thinking brain and your think muscle, and you're going to have to really start hashing away at these things. And this gets particularly important not only for cruising altitude, but your climb out, okay? So it's even weirder, all right? So again, we're climbing out here of KVNY with an 802. I'm sorry, it's not 807, it's 802. So you have to say, okay, so you're already 802. So the difference between 802 MSL and your cruising altitude of 5,500, you're going to have to do the math here. So that's about 47,000 feet. So you're going to have to find the winds aloft using this number, 47,000 feet, which is the difference between the airport and your cruising. So that's distance, and you got to cut that fool in half to get 2350. 350.
I need about 350.
2350 is kind of close to 3,000. Well, now you're going to have to do some more interpolation, which means you're going to have to figure out your winds at your starting airport, which fortunately you can listen to the ATIS to figure out what the winds are. And you can also figure out your temperature. And then you're going to have to look at this 3,000 mark here, pull it from there. And then you're going to have to do this nonsense here, right? The same interpolation to get this, which is your midway point of your climb out. And that is how you are going to figure out all the math that you need in your climb out portion. And that is interpolation. My rule, basically, is find your winds aloft of start, right, which is the airport you take off from, your end ground, right, which is the airport you land at, figure out your cruise, winds aloft, and then find your midpoints. I had to simplify. Basically, this is my interpolation strategy. And now we reach the final step of this mess, which by the final step, I mean all the work, which is plug everything in. I highly recommend the Free Pilot Training's Navigation Logs Explained video. It works really great. Follow him along and you can plug in all your numbers. I'm going to go ahead and do it right here, right now as an example. Here we have it. Here's all the plug and play numbers. Another thing I forgot to mention, these variations in the compass. Something you can put into your constants in your location. Taking off from KVNY, your variation is based on these goofy little things called isogonic lines, right? This is the magnetic variation from magnetic and true north. And in this case, this is 12 degrees east, and you use that little east is least and west is best to subtract that from any time I fly out from KVNY. One last little detail I want to say, and this is for me because this confused me. If you're confused as to how this little zigzag pattern works as far as lining things up, KVNY to top of climb are these little boxes here, right? And then you got this gobbledygook. To get from KVNY to top of climb, you must zig to this gobbledygook so you can zag to top of climb. So to get from here, you must do numbers and math And then you get to top of climb. To get from top of climb to bracket field, you have to do more numbers, and more math. And then you get to K-pop. Thing that trips me up personally is I would sometimes put the information of of the final destination below. Like I put all this 108, like this gobbledygook, I accidentally put down here. And that's what tripped me up as to like, wait, what's going on when I was calculating my, estimated time of arrival and the distance that was being traveled and everything. That's what tripped me up because this is the end of the line, right? In order to get from top of descent to KSBD, you would do this gobbledygook. But once you land, you're here, you're done, no more. Long story short, what helped me figure this out and what helped me actually be able to follow a tutorial was organization. So again, this is not really a tutorial, but this is the method that helped me understand how to tackle the VFR navlog when tutorials were kind of tripping me up. So hopefully it'll help you too.